Hello, friends. Welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. I'm your host, Heidi, a wife, mom of four, CU Regent, and the founder of Camp Bow Wow and the She Factor. With a passion for keeping the spirit of our state alive and well, I started this podcast to bring the people of Colorado together to celebrate the amazing state we call home. Come along on this journey with me as I travel across our old country roads in my vintage RV, interviewing folks that embody the true spirit of the Rocky Mountains. From the Front Range to the mile-high city to the Wild West of Southern Colorado, we'll celebrate the history, beauty, and Coloradans that make this place the colorful state it is. Each week, you'll meet people trailblazing the way for an even more colorful future for us all, making a huge difference along the way. Are you ready for a Rocky Mountain ride? Let's do this, Colorado. Hi, Heidi here with Heidi's Colorful Colorado. So excited to have our guest today, Natalie Tysdal, a mom, an entrepreneur now with her own podcast, and someone we all in Denver adore and know a lot about already, I think. But Natalie, tell us what you're up to now.
Hey, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, after almost 30 years in the news industry, COVID kind of changed my mindset in how I wanted to be with my family and have my own business, not have to be in a studio every day. So I started my own website and podcast, and I'm 3 months into it, and so far everything's great. I'm loving it.
Well, we have a lot to talk about then, because obviously this is a challenging new venture for me. Is it for you too? Is it hard to get used to all the different technology and doing things over Zoom versus in studio?
Well, congratulations to you for this podcast. And it is, I love a challenge. So I love something that's new and different, and learning. This has been a big one because the technology is very different, but the basics are still the same. Learning from people, asking questions, trying to get to the truth of things like that. That's what I do as a journalist. So I just get to do it in a different platform.
So Natalie, one of the things I love about podcasting, and I love about your podcast, which you've done a fantastic job with the launch in your first few episodes, is it humanizes people and you get to hear people's stories. And I think that's one thing that's missing in today's society. Today, we talk to the screens, we talk over Zoom, and I think it helps us hear people's stories and understand what they're going through in the podcast world, and knowing that we're going through things similar to other people, whereas when we watch the news or we just connect over Zoom, we don't get that. We don't get the deeper dive into what's going on in our lives.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's always been my goal, and actually another thing that I'm doing now that I'm podcasting is I said when I left the full-time gig, I'm going to give back, find a way to give back and create a nice platform for people, especially our younger generation in journalism. So I'm teaching, and I've just started that kind of a little bit on the side. Next year will be a little bit more when we go into the fall, and working with high school kids in journalism and teaching them exactly what you said, that every story has a human angle. You can talk about any topic you want, and you can go into the research and you can get the statistics, but until you give it a story where there's a real person behind it who has either struggled from it or is trying to learn from it, it doesn't really connect with people. They don't, you know how you just don't have that same feeling about something until you understand that it affects a real person. And so that's the number one thing I tell them is every story, every interview, you have to humanize it. You have to give people a reason to care about it.
Well, I think that's a way to get past this divide we have in society right now, is to hear people's stories and connect just in little ways so that you're less likely to argue with them, right?
That's so true. You are less likely to argue with anyone when you really understand their issue and their story.
You know, I think that Colorado has a special spirit about it, the people that live here. And one of the things I love to ask guests is, what epitomizes the spirit of Colorado to you? Like, what do you love about Colorado, or how do you describe it to people from out of state?
Oh, what a great question. And doesn't everybody say the weather? We get everything, right? We get all seasons. My oldest daughter, she lives in Florida, so we were just out there, and you get the heat, you get the humidity, and we enjoy that for like a week. And then you're like, okay, I just want to go back to Colorado, where I do get the nice sunshine, but then I'm going to have snow on the same day sometimes too. So definitely that. I mean, that's so much of what we enjoy here in Colorado, is that we get to enjoy all of our seasons. Also, just the people here. You know, I grew up in the Midwest, so being a part of a community where you relate to people and you get to know your neighbor and you share stories, that's another thing we love about Colorado.
I agree. And I like to think of Colorado as like the wild, wild west, like rugged individualism where we all want to live our lives the way we want to live them and not be told kind of what to do, or no limits is how I see it. And so one of the reasons I love living here is that we have an incredible entrepreneur community here in Colorado. And now that you've taken this big jump and you're doing your own thing, like what are the challenges you're facing, especially as a mom, being a mom?
Oh, scary. I always say to people when they ask me about being an entrepreneur, especially kind of a second career. I spent 28 years as a television journalist. And so creating the second career, it is scary. And I know for other people who are thinking about starting something new, that when you get comfortable in something, it's hard to leave. And I got comfortable being a morning show anchor, if you could believe it, being in front of a camera. I did get comfortable with that, but I knew that I wanted to start something new. And my neighbors, my friends, like especially being a mom, have been so supportive, listening to the podcast, sharing the podcast. And the podcast really is about just that, about starting something new, believing in that, having a positive mindset. It's about health. It's about family. It's about finding happiness and being really comfortable with who you are.
You know what I think it brings about too is community, like building community. It's something that's missing right now. And we're each finding our own way to do that, right? Our struggle to find other women that are dealing with the same issues or other entrepreneurs that are dealing with other issues, new podcasters, right?
Yeah.
And the challenges we face doing this. But, one thing that concerns me is how do we get through the noise? Like the noise is so negative right now. You turn on the news and everything is just intense and mean-spirited and hard, and we have such hope for Colorado in our stories and the people that we're interviewing. How do we get through the noise and help listeners hear our podcasts and our creative kind of bent on how to approach society right now?
It's a big issue, and I hate to tell people to turn off the news because it was my livelihood for so long, but it's one of the things that I had to do. We become, and I truly believe that we become and we are what we fill our minds with. And for 5 hours a day, I was talking about news, often negative news. And granted, the last couple of years, politics and divisiveness and so much that's hurtful in our society, I had to search hard and dig deep for hope and for that happiness. And so it played a large role in me making the decision to leave. I still think, obviously, news, especially local news, is very needed for each of our communities. But I wanted a broader perspective. I wanted to be able to speak to people in our city and in our state, around the world. And I have people who are listening to the podcast from all over the world. And Denver and Colorado has supported me in doing that. So being able to help people, especially as for many years I was an education reporter. I've been a health reporter for over 10 years where I specialized. And I found in both of those areas that those are places where people look for hope. In health news, it's what is that new medication or what is that new procedure? And oh, wow, I didn't know about that. So you could provide that hope to people. Same with education, better ways of teaching our kids, helping our kids, opportunities. So I found that those were areas that I could specialize in on the podcast where I was providing that sense of hope without the divisiveness and the negativity.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you hit on something, education. I mean, we're reimagining school right now.
Aren't we?
Oh,
yeah.
My goodness.
We have kids the same age. We both understand this.
And, I think that we're going to come out of COVID with obviously some negative things that have come about in our lives, but some positive ones too, about how our kids learn and how every child is individual and needs an individual education. So tell me about your efforts around education and your passion for it and how that plays out with your own kids.
Oh, boy. I could ask you the same question with kids and going back and forth. I don't know where to start. We have a 20-year-old, she's in college, and then we have a high school student, and we also have an elementary school student. And they are so different in the way they learn, their levels of learning, obviously, from college to high school to fifth grade. But I don't know where to start. Kids learn so differently. And I think in my past as an education reporter and then being the founding member of an elementary school here in Colorado, that I learned that kids do learn in different ways. We cannot put them in a box and say, here's how you learn. Be that in a classroom or at home or through phonics or, kids are just, you have to be tuned in to the individual child. You have to know that for one of my kids, he loves numbers and he will learn anything if you give him kind of that style of learning. Another one of my daughters is totally theatrical. If you put something to song or you put it into a rhythm, she will learn that. I've learned with our eldest that she is an auditory learner. So again, through sound, she was a drummer, she played guitar, like through sound, she would learn. Some through visual learning. It's hard as a parent to know that. You got to tap into your teachers and do your research. And that was part of the the school that I helped found here in Colorado, is really understanding the child and at an early age, putting them through different things where you could find where they best learn. But I think coming back to today, that's what we're finding with kids who some do learn well at home. Our college student, she loves her online learning and she's thriving. Our youngest is a social butterfly, and our middle child is a social butterfly. She missed her friends so much. Our youngest is just Mr. Fun. He wants to be in with a bunch of kids. And so you really have to know, and I think we are going to find that medium where parents are saying, it's okay that they're home sometimes, but I have to get them out with their friends or in a social setting so that they're fulfilling that need too. So I think, and I'd like to hear, I know I turn into the interviewer again. I've been a journalist too long.
Please, feel free.
But I'd like to know, like with your kids too, have you found that being home and being in school, that some do better in the home setting?
Yeah, and I think it goes to topics also. One of the fun things that happened was my dad became their history teacher.
Oh, I love that.
And it wasn't necessarily structured, but every day for 30 minutes, it would just give me a 30-minute break, and my dad would hop on Zoom and basically read them a book or talk about a story. He loves history. And he would make it really fun and engaging and then give them a project to do.
Great.
And then we found that just getting creative, getting out of the box, like thinking outside of just sit in front of the lecture and then do the assignment, anything you could do to make it fun. Like we did counting cups and we built this huge cup castle. And it all fell down, of course, the solo cups, right? And they just thought that was hilarious. But they learned some things about algebra and counting, et cetera, that they wouldn't have if they just did the lesson. So I think, and that extends to my work at CU as a regent. We call it adaptive learning or experiential learning. And you actually remember things better when you put them into practice after you learn about them. Yeah. And so I think it's going to go the gamut from K through probably PhD, that the more engaged you can be in your learning and the more practical and skills-based it can be, even if you're learning to be an astronaut, the better you're going to put what you learn into practice. So I think that's part of what we're going to come out of this with is adaptive learning, experiential learning, going on field trips, getting out of the box, and just doing things differently and making learning fun again, right?
Absolutely. It registers in a different part of the brain when you feel it and see it and experience it. Even as adults, yes. I think I learned every day. It's what I've loved about being a journalist is one day I might be an expert in real estate and the next day I might be an expert in geography or whatever the case, in health, whatever it was, I was learning every day and often experiencing because I was out interviewing people or on the land or with people. And it registered differently with me when I was actually able to be there and tell that story in person.
That's fantastic. I totally agree. And, one thing, you're such a role model for young journalists, especially young women journalists. And my daughter actually got a broadcast journalism degree from Oregon, and she's running She Factor now, and she loves doing the podcast and doing the live events. And so she's using that in some way, but it's such a challenging time for young women entering the workforce right now. It's almost like paralyzing how many options there are. And I like to tell young women, it's the best time to be a woman in the history of mankind, no pun intended. But it's also really important that they find their sweet spot or they figure out what they really enjoy and focus their career path on that and find a good outlet for it, whether it be the gig economy or a corporation that they align values with, what advice do you give to young women that are just starting out, just graduating from college, whether it be in journalism or not?
Well, with two young women who are trying to figure that out, my oldest, again, is in college, and she's studying business and psychology, and she's a collegiate athlete. So trying to mix those two things and understanding the mind and what motivates us. But she doesn't know where she's going to take that. And I think the best, I almost hesitate to say this because I'm living through it right now, but I almost had to hesitate to say, don't be so pressured by it. Our middle daughter is all about musical theater and loves marketing. So she's thinking maybe she'll marry those two. Maybe she will do some marketing for musical theater companies and dance companies. She doesn't know. She's 16. But I think the pressure on young people right now to figure that out, I certainly didn't know, even when I went to college. I was an advertising major, ended up with 3 minors, and ended up as a photojournalist taking video, and that fell then into a producer and reporter and anchor job. So I think you do have to always have, and the advice I would give is to always have a goal. Doesn't matter what it is, just keep climbing the ladder and then shift your ladder. You can shift it, but keep climbing it. So to not have anything is a mistake. To not have something you're thinking about would be a mistake. But to have to feel at a young age, they have to have it all figured out from the day you walk into college, I think puts too much pressure on our young people. So to just, again, have that ladder, keep climbing it, but don't be afraid to shift it.
I think that's the name of a new podcast or book. I love that.
Let's do it. We could do it together.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great time. We'll fit it in at about 4 a.m, right?
No, I gave that up a long time ago. I don't get up at 2:30 in the morning anymore.
How did you do that? My goodness.
You know, as a mom, I did it because I knew I could be home in the afternoon with my kids. But I turned late in the afternoon, and I know a lot of moms will relate to me. I turned into what I called zombie mom. I turned late in the afternoon.
That's why Starbucks does so well at drive-thrus.
Yeah, they should just call it, here's the zombie mom drink. Because when I would go to pick the kids up and carpool, I had that afternoon headache because I had been up since 2 to 2:30 in the morning, and I never got to bed on time because I was helping the kids. And that came first for a long time until the last year. And I think it really was the pandemic that helped me realize if there's anything that is good that has come out of all of this chaos, it's been perspective. And for me, it was, I am not going to be good for my kids or my husband or those I love if I'm not healthy and if I'm not taking care of myself. So learning that self-care is for myself, but it's not selfish. It's taking care of myself so that I can take care of other people.
Oh, that's fantastic. I need to hear that every day. I'm going to put that on rewind.
Don't so many moms do that, though? They put everybody else first, and then their sleep suffers or their eating suffers or they don't exercise or whatever that is. And we have to realize that in the end, we're really not helping everyone if we're not healthy.
No, grumpy mom is not helpful mom. No. Goodness gracious. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for being on today. I like to wrap up with a question that's kind of fun and playful, and maybe you can even talk about this with your kids, but what's the most Colorado thing you guys do as a family or that you do personally?
Oh, we love getting out in Colorado. I mean, we've zip-lined in Vail. We've gone out to the Western Slope where my family lives, and we love those trails out there. Mount Sneffels is a beautiful view from my parents' home. And we love doing that, but we also love being here in Denver where you get to see the mountains every day without having to drive up into the mountains. And we just love the variety of Colorado and being able to go back and do a trail a mile from our house and sled just down the block, like just being able to do all of these activities on a daily basis.
All we need is a beach and then we're good, right?
Yeah, you're right. But then once you go out to the beach, again, you can't wait to get back to Colorado.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you again for being on. It's been wonderful talking to you. We have so much in common.
Thanks.
And hopefully the listeners will tap into that as well.
Well, congratulations again. Love the podcast and love what you're doing with it.
Well, back at you. Congratulations to you as well. Thank you for joining us today on Heidi's Colorful Colorado. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And definitely follow me on Instagram to keep up with my latest adventures. In the meantime, happy trails from me, Heidi Ganahl.